People have always said, why New York and not San Francisco? It's like, because New York is just a much more interesting city than San Francisco. In my opinion, there's just a greater diversity of people and careers and industry here. And I've always said that of all the things going on in New York, like tech is the seventh most important thing or the 10th most important thing. And that's what's wonderful about it.
This is Executives Unplugged. I'm Keith Cowing, your host and executive coach. My guest today is Dennis Crowley. Dennis is the founder of Dodgeball and Foursquare and now Hopscotch Labs. He has been building, scaling, and selling companies in New York City for 20 plus years, and he has amazing ideas about how to install systems as an entrepreneur to avoid burnout, how to build a world-class team, and building a future of technology that is about improving communities and social interaction, not disintermediating them. Let's jump in. I want to jump right in on a specific topic that I find fascinating, which is your field notes, notebooks. What notebook are you on, and how does this fit into your life as an entrepreneur?
All right, I got a book right here. This is notebook number 119. I've got maybe one page left in my book. So I got to sit down at a coffee shop sometime next week and go through the process of, I cross everything off when I'm doing it. Hold on, let me back up. Like, I carry this everywhere I go. There's never a time where I don't have it. I'm constantly taking notes on like stuff that I have to do and, like ideas for products or like things to do with the kids. But then also I kind of keep a list of like advice to myself, things I want to like keep in mind for future projects. A lot of the stuff gets copied over from one notebook to the next, almost like a 100 commandments that I carry around with me.
How do you know it's 119? Do you literally keep track of this?
Yeah, it says book number 119 right on the front up here. And I have like a notebook. I have 2 shoeboxes full of these books, all just kind of lined up. And I thought that at some point, maybe I would like take them and photograph them and make like a big like collage out of them, but it seems like a lot of work.
I've heard from scientific research that the neurochemistry in your brain is connected to your hand in a way where literally if you physically write with a pen, it connects to your memory in a different way and it sinks in more than if you take notes on your computer or just think about it. You find that this is a way to reflect and capture ideas. Tell me about how it impacts your work.
I always use this brand, like Field Notes brand. And they've got, I think, the statement on their website, which is like, I don't write it down to remember it later. I write it down to remember it now. And I agree with that, where it's like the act of writing it down just kind of commits it to memory in a different way. I go back through this book, like a couple times a day, and I flip through the pages and I make sure that like, almost everything gets crossed out. Everything turns into something, whether it's an email or something in like a bug ticket, in Linear or something, or a calendar entry for like, I'm going to take the kids to this thing. One of my kids has got some ADHD issues. And it's like the ability to keep his brain focused on stuff. And through dealing with that, I've kind of realized I kind of have the same thing where like we can be at a dinner and I'll have something that pops in my head and I can't focus on the conversation because I'm trying so hard to hold on to that thing. And so I realized if I just write it down, it like frees my brain up. It's like, oh, that's captured. Okay, go back to the conversation. You don't have to remember that now. It's okay if you forget it because it's written down. And so it just allows me to be more present. Like it quiets my brain when it's too active.
I try to do the same in my own life where I have a lot of different projects and I'm not as physical world as the notebook. I maybe need to take up this habit. But I kind of think of college where I'd have a physics book and I'd work on physics. But then after the test, I'd close the physics book and I'd put it away and I'd work on math. And physics didn't haunt me while I was working on math. But now I have so many little things in email and text and everything haunts me all the time. And I find if I have a way to just close loose ends and just close the book mentally and sort of put it aside, then I can actually focus on the thing in front of me. And this may be the skill of the next 10 years is the ability to focus in a world that works against you.
It's just like you need to have a system for something. Like people, like this is my system. Like this works for me. It doesn't work for everyone, but like I feel like everyone needs to have some version of a system that works for them.
I like the saying, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And you have to have
interesting.
systems that hold you up in place. And thinking about the stuff that you've worked on, you're on your third iteration, at least, of starting a company in New York City. You had Dodgeball that sold to Google. You had Foursquare. Now you're working on your latest project. How do you keep up the passion to do it 3 times? How do you give young entrepreneurs advice to play the long game and not burn out?
I feel like the stuff I've always been working on, it kind of follows that theme of like software in cities. And I feel like as long as like I started doing that when I lived in New York because the city was overwhelming and I was trying to design software to make it less overwhelming and have just continued working, kind of on that in that direction. And so, yeah, it's been a couple different projects. It's been a couple companies, but it's kind of the same thing. And, that's almost like my hobby. Like that's the stuff that I think about when I walk around the city. It's like I notice things and I try to remember things and I try to think of ways to make things more efficient. And that's just like, I like to do that. And then I write a lot of the stuff down. And sometimes you have this idea to make a product that solves the problem. And then sometimes, you start working on that project and it turns into a product. And then you start working on that product and it turns into a company. And then you end up working on that company for a long time. And that has just kind of been the thing that's happened over and over again. I think the trick is trying to make it not feel like work. Like certainly like building a company is work. Like we have a bunch of people, we have to manage them. There's like bills to be paid and investor memos to write and like that's work. But like sitting down at a whiteboard and trying to sketch out like, okay, what do we think the future of this thing looks like? That doesn't feel like work to me. That feels like fun to me. And so, I think the trick is like just finding a thing that like finding a version of the work that energizes you instead of draining your energy.
You've done this many times in New York. There are a few people I can say 20 years of entrepreneurship, starting companies and going through the whole realm. What's different for you this time? What's easier? What's harder? How do you approach this differently than the first company you started?
This one that we're working on now is pretty hard, just because the thing we're doing is like a city guide for AirPods through the lens of a AI powered radio DJ that talks to you when you put your AirPods in. Like, first of all, that's like a mouthful. It's a lot. There's nothing else that's like this. Like it's interruptive AI that's like we have your headphones on, just sends you messages. And so it's like there's nothing else like it. So that there's nothing else to crib from. You can't be like, oh, let's just steal that design pattern from that successful product over there. Like we are like inventing the way that this stuff is supposed to work, which is both exciting, but also like it's challenging and it's frustrating. Like when we did Dodgeball, like Dodgeball was very inspired by like the Marauders map in Harry Potter. And so it's like, oh, this is the thing. Like we are inspired by that thing. Let's go make that thing. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff we had to figure out. And then we did Foursquare. It's like, well, let's kind of just do Dodgeball, but we'll do it on the iPhone. And then we did all this other stuff on top of it. And in this is just like totally different because the tools are totally different. And the people that I'm working with are totally different. And the skill sets of those people are totally different. To have engineers that can also double as product people because they're, augmenting their skills with AI, and to have product people that can moonlight as engineers because they just do everything in Claude Code. It's just like, it's a weird team of people that can do a lot of different things. It's just totally different than the way that we had built previous companies. And it's like, it's very exciting, but then it's also like, it's just hard it's overwhelming. It's hard to kind of keep up with it.
Talk to me a little bit about the juxtaposition between, you're always on the cutting edge of it was mobile and then it was GPS and it was location and now it's AI. And on the flip side, you have an old notebook that looks like it's from 1980 and you write with a pen. Like, how do you combine these two things in your head? And does that give you a break from all of the screens? I also think it's interesting that your product is not screen based. It is AI and it's leveraging things, but it's not about staring at a screen and touching and tapping really. And so how do you think about the newest of technology, but maybe some very not new modes of interacting with things, like speaking to somebody?
Yeah, I could write like a whole manifesto about this. Like we built Foursquare, we built the company vision, imagining that like people were going to use their phones less and less as contextual aware computing became the norm. And so we had built all this infrastructure that was meant to help usher in this like world of contextual aware computing. Like we were looking at things like Google Glass and, like a long time ago, like we were building snap to place technology, the ability for your phone to like check in without you even having to use your phone or press the button. Like it was really hard stuff back like, it's like 10 years ago. Around that time was the rise of like Snap and Instagram, where these companies are like, no. We want you to use your phone all the time. And like here we are being like, no. The goal is to check in as quickly as possible, put your phone away, and then hang out with your friends. And so there was this divergent vision for where the future was like, I guess like what the future was supposed to be. And that's the version that won. Oh no, we're going to just be glued to our phones all the time. We're going to engineer software so that you do not want to put your phone down. And that was just always the antithesis of what we wanted to do. right? Like the last stuff that we worked on at Foursquare was like, let's make apps that you don't even have to use, right? Like a version of Foursquare that you never that works without even touching it. And that's where we started messing around with some of the AirPod stuff. And so after I left Foursquare and I worked on a couple different things, like I have a soccer startup called Street FC, and I run a soccer team called Kingston Stockade in the Hudson Valley, and analog projects, like people out in the real world doing stuff facilitated by software. But then when I kind of got drawn back into like, let's build another thing for cities, but it's like let's make a thing that you don't have to use. Like there's no feed, there's nothing to look at, there's nothing to it's like imagine like a TikTok style algorithm that gives you stuff that you're endlessly interested in, but that stuff is in the real world. And the more you walk around, the more it tries to convince you to walk more and see more. Like make the stickiness happen in the real world as opposed to make it happen on the screen. And it's like that is not the way that the world is going, right? Like we're getting to the point where everyone wants you to put the headsets on and disappear from reality, but that's not the version of the world that we want to live in. And so I'm trying to make the thing that allows us to live in the version of the world that we want to live in.
There's two threads in there that I think are fascinating. One is contextually aware. And then the other
Yeah.
one is what I hear is basically ambient. It's behind the scenes
Yeah.
and it helps you do things in a better way, but it's not
Hmm.
the front and center purpose. So I spent a bunch of time in healthcare tech, and
Yeah.
ambient is a big topic there where you
Hmm.
can just have it record the conversation with the physician and the patient,
Yeah.
not so
Yeah.
that you spend more time with the computer, so you spend less. So you can actually talk to your patient and
Yeah.
do your work and have
Yeah.
everything else just go bill Medicaid, take care of that for me, et cetera.
Sure.
And I feel like part of that is coming through here. And then the contextually aware is really relevant right now with AI, where AI is super powerful, but only if you give it the right context. And getting context
Yes.
is a very tricky problem. And so, talk to me a little bit more about those two themes, that ambient nature of it, to use technology to be less in your face, but to help you enjoy life. And then the
Yeah.
contextually aware. How do you work on that problem?
That's the stuff that's tough, right? Like in order to make stuff that feels personalized and contextually aware, it has to know you. And the only way to get these systems to really know you is that you train it on data that you've produced or that you've written or that you've liked, right? Any of these algorithmic systems that are serving up stuff that you like they're learning your preferences by observing your behavior. And so we need to have a piece of that. And then there's the other thing of like understanding people's context in the real world. Like, where are you moving? Is this like, how quickly are you on a bike? Or are you walking? Are you in the subway? Or in your car? Are you in a city, in a suburb? Are you in a familiar neighborhood, an unfamiliar neighborhood? Are you with friends or strangers? Like, are you in between meetings? Do you have time? Right? Those are things that we're trying to understand all those signals. And we can understand about half of them. Right? The way that, the project we're working on now, it's called Bebot. And, as you move through the city, it detects changes in neighborhoods. And it's like, oh, you're never in this neighborhood. I recognize that you crossed over in the boundary. Let me see if I can find something interesting that's happening nearby or nearby and like within the next 18 hours that might be of interest to you based on all the things that we know about you. Like I was just at my kid's school for like a parent teacher thing. When I walked out, I put my headphones in and it's like, hey, just so you know, there's like a 30th anniversary of Pac-Man exhibit that opened up on 52nd Street if you want to go check it out sometime this weekend. And I was like, that's pretty good. Like it knows I like video games. It knows I like vintage stuff. It combines them. It finds this event on the internet about this Pac-Man thing that's opening. It sends a 1-sentence push notification. Now, did I get that at exactly the right time? I'm like, no, I left my kid's school. I'm running back here to jump on this podcast with you. Like maybe that's not the best time to hear it, but it's probably better that I heard the message than not hearing the message. And it was like at least relevant to my to my interest and my context in the sense that like it's happening this weekend and it's happening in this city. And so like we're kind of slowly getting better at this. I always tell the team like the product gets 5% better every week. And you just keep compounding that over time. Eventually you kind of have a thing that works pretty well.
In talking about solving these hard technical problems, design problems, product problems, you are a product person, a designer at heart, at least from the outside, it seems. You really care about designing solutions for these problems. How do you think about hiring on your team? When should a CEO hire a chief product officer?
Yeah, it's a great piece of advice I got a while ago was like, CEO is a job, but like there's different types of CEO. You're either the sales CEO or you're the BD CEO or you're the engineering CTO or you're the product CTO. And so I've always thought that I was more of the product type of CEO, so I can be like, all right, I can fill in for the head of product for most things. And I did that for a long time at Foursquare before we eventually hired people to run it. With the project that we're working on now, just because like the tools are so different, we hired a lead product person almost immediately, just because I met this woman who was just like very, very skilled, like really into the product and had worked in stuff in adjacent spaces and was very fluent in like AI tools and technology. And it's like, you just know, not only do you know stuff that I don't, but you know how to work in a way that I don't know how to work. Given that I think there's a whole crop of younger folks that are just AI tools first, where I feel like I have to work to kind of make the AI tools native to my workflow. It's like just organic for some of these folks. So that's different. And it's been wonderful because I feel like from the beginning, I kind of have like a counterpart to bounce ideas off of. And I think that's really a big part of it, to really simplify it. It's really hard to sit like at a whiteboard and just draw the same thing over and over by yourself and get some insight. You really need to do it in front of an audience of 2 or 3 people, ideally like your co-founders, your team, and you're like, this is how I think about the world. Like, what do you guys think of this? And then they come up and they draw their own things and you erase it and you draw it again. Like for the first, like 6 months that we were working on this project with a small team of like 4 or 5 people, we would do this exercise of like drawing the company. And every Monday we would like draw the product, the whole thing on the whiteboard. And every week when you do the same exercise, but it would be like 10% different from week to week. And it's like, well, this week we drew this part and we left out the part that we drew last week. And it's like, it just was the constant evolution of the thing. And then you realize the parts that weren't changing week over week were the things that we really needed to build. And you can't do that by yourself. Like, you have to have other people in the room, and they don't necessarily need to be like the head of product, but they have to be people that, like, some of them have to be technical, some of them have to be design focused, some of them have to be product people, some of them have to have empathy towards, UX and what people do out in the real world. Building a team that has diverse opinions and then constantly having the same conversation over and over again with the team has been very helpful for us.
People can get obsessed with frameworks and spreadsheets and rankings and very analytical stuff. What you're saying is you draw it a bunch of times and it evolves, and maybe there were 10 things, but there's 4 that always come up. So, hey, those are the 4 that we're starting with because it's clearly the core of the story.
Yeah, and the teams can use whatever tools you want. Like, we've jumped from Trello to Asana to we're using Linear now. It's like, I don't care what tools you use. Like, just migrate from one thing to the next. Just find a system that works. It's like the notebook, right? This is a system that works for managing my brain. Like, the company has found a system for managing, the way that we work, kind of like a little bit in the office, a little bit outside the office. It's just, you just got to find a thing that works and then just double down on it.
You mentioned skill when you talked about bringing on your head of product. You didn't say experience, and I'm interested in your view on experience versus skill when you're bringing on a product person and how you value each and how you test for each.
The experience is important in the sense that, like, have you built something before? Have you built something from scratch? Like, do you have the empathy for how hard it is to go from 0 to 1? And then have you lived through the experience of, like, you made something, it didn't work, and you had to change it, and that didn't work, and you changed it again, and maybe it worked, and maybe it didn't. And I think that's important. In terms, like, we're not at the point yet where I'm hiring for the experience of, I've managed a big team in a big company. Like, if anything, that feels like it's a skill set that we don't really want at the moment. I feel like we're more I've been more biased towards trying to bring people together that have worked at smaller companies on smaller teams, and they've just kind of lived through the uncertain early days of something, because those people are less likely to get frazzled with the uncertainty, right? Because, there is that notion of, like, is this going to work? I don't know. We got 18 months worth of runway. We'll figure it out. Like, what do you mean 18 months? It's like, hey, this is just a startup. Like, you raise some money, you have a window to figure something out, you figure it out or you don't. And some people are really comfortable operating in that environment and some people are not. And it's same thing with the environment of, okay, you have a job description, but the job description is kind of like, make sure that all the stuff gets done, right? But that's not my job. Like, that's, you can't really bring people like that on in an early startup days. It's just, everyone's got to work on a little bit of everything. We're kind of inventing what we think the future of proactive AI is supposed to look like in these wearables. And like, you have to be comfortable with that. Like, we're going to try a whole bunch of stuff and a lot of it's just not going to work. And like, maybe there is no answer. Maybe there's no way to make it work right now. And you kind of have to be like comfortable with that uncertainty and up for the journey of it. A friend of mine said something like a week, not too long ago, where it's like, when you lay out your company vision, which we just did for the first time, like a couple weeks ago, like I articulated, like, here's the vision and here's the vision and the mission. And it's like, okay, we are a team and we are on a quest together, like a role-playing game, like Dungeons and Dragons style quest to complete that vision, and it's like when you think of it through the lens of like, you've assembled this party that has to go and solve this quest. It's a different thing than like, we just come to work and we work on this project. We exist to solve this thing that may be unsolvable, but we're going to try our best to solve it. And it's just a different framing, but it's a framing that I really like.
What are the biggest mistakes you think CEOs make when hiring in the early stage?
Putting too much weight on the fact that like someone worked on this successful project at Facebook 3 years ago, like, oh my gosh, this person did this thing. It's like, yeah, but like as part of a team of 20 people that was, working on infrastructure that's 15 years old and bulletproof, supported by a team of 50,000, like I remember very distinctly when we hired, like when we were scaling up Foursquare and we hired our first couple of people, we hired them out of Google and they came and worked at Foursquare and they had never worked on non-Google infrastructure before. And they're like, oh, you don't have anything here. There's no tools. I'm like, yeah, nothing. You got to build all of it from scratch. And it was just eye-opening. And so you kind of, people that have been in big companies for a long time, they get really comfortable with those environments and tools. And that's fine. That's great. But like in these things that start from scratch, you don't have a lot of those luxuries. You have to get people that are okay with that. And it's also like, we certainly we're working with people that have worked at big companies for a while, which is great because they come with the experience of, we're working with a guy that's been at Twitter for a bunch of years. And Twitter was a hard place to work. Like, Twitter had lots of different leadership changes, lots of different mission and vision changes, lots of changes in like philosophy and what are we doing and what's important and what's not. And it's like, for someone that lived through that experience, maybe it's not a startup because Twitter's huge, but like you are in the chaos and you understand the chaos, right? And so I think, just having lived through an environment like that is a thing to seek out and not discriminate against.
Interesting. I've lived through some of that chaos myself as a product person on the team at Twitter in earlier days. When you think about, I think it's very interesting of taking somebody from a big company and bringing them to a startup environment where I've seen more often than not, coming from a Microsoft, a Facebook, a Google, that somebody's super skilled and really great, but they get in the early environment and for one reason or another, it just doesn't work. And I'm curious what your take is on how to test for, will it work when they make this transition? Because there's some people that really will do well. They're just bottled up in a big company and they don't fit there and they would do great in an early stage. But it's very hard to know in advance. Is it worth the risk for both sides to roll the dice? Do you just look for people that have early stage experience? Or is it like Twitter where you're saying you don't have early stage, but you have uncertainty and chaos. And so therefore maybe you can make it through here. Or you have something else in your life where you've dealt with uncertainty and chaos.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you look for people's side projects. Like what did you do on the side? Like everyone's got a side hustle. Like what is it? And sometimes it's like, oh, I've been working on this project. It's an app. I never really launched it, but I've been working on it. It's a game, whatever. And it's like, well, let me see it. Like, oh, it sucks. I just like, well, let me see what it is. And I think it's those people that have these passions that like you continue to kind of crank on it a little bit outside of your day job. And a lot of times it's like, it's an app, it's a game, it's something technical, and you can see someone's thought process through that. We work out of like a venture studio called BetaWorks. There's a lot of people there that are just like going from project to project. Like we are in an environment where we are exposed to a lot of people that spend their time working on a lot of things concurrent, as opposed to like, oh, I'm just one person that's been at Google for 15 years. Like, I don't know a ton of those people. Like the people that I hang out with regularly, like they're all working on 5 different things. And we just, like, I feel comfortable working with those people. And like, we have access to that pool of people that does those types of things. And so those are the types of people that we gravitate towards hiring. Like if this thing works and it turns into like, you're like, oh, wow, this is a real company. We got to scale up. We got 20, 30, 40 people. Like, then you start to go dig into these bigger companies and bring out these people that really know how to like build and manage and operate and deal with these teams. But I think in the moment that we're in, it's about who are the missing Lego pieces that we need to get this thing to the point that it works.
And you mentioned BetaWorks, high density environment of
Yeah.
entrepreneurial,
Hmm.
interesting, exciting, passionate people. That gets to the New York City ecosystem. What's changed in the New York tech world from 20 years ago when you were doing this? And how does it look now to build a company?
Yeah, we think about this stuff a lot because there's like this 30th anniversary of New York Tech thing coming up. And so there's this big party, the big gala going on. So it's funny, there's a lot of conversations about like the old days. I think the two big things that have changed is number one, if you go all the way back, there was people that thought that the internet was just going to be like a fad and it wasn't like a real business. And like certainly like there was like the 1.0 and then the big crash and then the 2.0. And it was like a 2.0 where all the people that were really passionate about the idea of the internet really started to build meaningful stuff because they were not the ones that were just like, working in it because it was a hot thing to do. It was like they were really passionate about the space. The other thing is when we were trying to fundraise for Foursquare back in the early days, there was just not a lot of venture in New York. There's a couple funds like, Unisquare Ventures and, a handful of others, but there wasn't like you would go to Boston, you'd go to Philadelphia, you'd have to go down out to San Francisco to meet with most of them. And then around
For
the
the first
time that
meeting,
like,
too, there was no
yeah.
Zoom meeting for the first one. If you had a
Yeah,
20-minute
yeah.
coffee, it was in person.
Yeah. And like this, I think this is one of Foursquare's claim to fame, to be honest, is that like we were so hot in those early days that funds that missed out on the deal, like we probably talked to them, but they just missed out on it. Like they ended up putting people in New York. Where it's like, we can't miss out on these deals anymore. And it was us and it was Tumblr and it was Etsy. There was like three of us in the early days. And then, you started to see like first round's got like one person in New York now, like they rented one desk, like Spark Capital's got someone in New York. And then you started to see more funds kind of putting a presence in New York. So they were part of the ecosystem and that made it easier for New York companies to raise money. And then of course, what I think is one of the biggest contributors is Google New York built the biggest engineering organization that maybe New York has ever seen. And I remember people thinking like, these guys are crazy if they think they're going to build an engineering organization in New York. I was part of that cohort that moved into the Googleplex, right? At that time. And we were thinking, they are never going to fill this space. And of course, like they filled that space in like 5 other buildings since. But all those, like a lot of those people got recruited out to other startups. And it was a real superpower for the early cohort of New York tech companies to be able to reach into Google New York and not just pull out an employee, but to pull out like 5 of them, 5 people that had worked together, like that all knew how to hire based on the Google system, all knew how to work together based on the Google system. They were trained Google PMs, they were trained Google engineers. And like that was like a gift to be able to hire like a dozen of those people out and have them all working together on a different project that wasn't related to Google. And it was a huge accelerator, I think, for the New York tech scene.
One of my theories on that, too, is on the talent side, where you need founders to start things and you need builders to build things. I think we had some of that
Yeah.
back then. The
Mhm.
director tier is how you scale things. And I don't think there
Yeah.
was any director tier talent in New York that really understood tech and how to build. And on the West Coast,
Yeah.
you could just go hire somebody from Dropbox or Facebook or whatever.
Yeah.
And on the East Coast, it was super hard. And now there's this huge bench of director talent where
That's right.
when it's
Yeah.
working and you need to scale the org
Mhm.
and the company, you can bring in amazing people that know how to build, but also know how to scale. And that
Yeah.
just wasn't there before.
Yeah. And also on the sales and BD side. And that's like, I remember this was something we struggled with in like 2013 or something. And I remember this being a knock against New York tech at that moment in time where it's like, Valley is still better because like you can hire that, that BD executive from such and such, and they come with the squad, like they come with the team. Like you're not just hiring one person. Of course, you hire one person at a time, but then that person recruits all of their people. And now I think that infrastructure exists, but like, like it started first with engineering and then maybe with product, then with design, and then with sales, and then with BD. But like now, New York has all that.
When you went from the early days to scaling at Foursquare, how did you deal with that as a leader, as a CEO that has to transform from black magic and adrenaline to, hey, we're operating a real company here?
We were thankful to have good, experienced board members at the time. That was probably the big superpower we had, is that by having folks from Union Square and folks from Spark and folks from Andreessen Horowitz, yes, they're very talented investors and board members, but because they're very talented, they are also on the boards of all these other companies. And so we would have these problems, like whether it could be, technical issues, BD strategy, personnel issues. And you could bring them up to the board and they would say, I can't tell you what the answer is, but I can tell you how Twitter dealt with this, how Pinterest dealt with this, how Facebook dealt with this, and how, this other company's dealing with it. And so here's the menu of options. And then you'd look and be like, oh, well, why don't we do a little bit of what Twitter did and a little bit of what Etsy did? And then that's our solution. Having quality board members means they probably sit on other boards or they're part of funds that are involved in other boards. So they have access to all the answers. And they don't, again, they don't give you the answers, but they give you the menu of options to choose from. And sometimes that's the best thing you can get out of it.
What are you excited about for the next 10 years of New York tech?
People have always said, why New York and not San Francisco? It's because New York is just a much more interesting city than San Francisco. In my opinion, there's just a greater diversity of people and careers and industry here. And I've always said that of all the things going on in New York, like tech is the 7th most important thing or the 10th most important thing. Half the people you meet don't give a shit about the tech thing you're working on. And that's what's wonderful about it. You got all these people that are here for a reason to do their thing and prove their thing in this city that just has this endless amount of stimulation and has all this overlap of all this talent. And then you've got this huge democratization of you can just type a paragraph into Claude Code about what you want and kind of almost get something out of it. You give those tools to people in an environment where there's just a huge density of talent and culture and interest and passion, and good stuff will come out of it, especially when you got all these people that are newly have the ability to make these things without having to spin up a huge engineering team or really understand engineering.
Where can people find your new project?
Let's see. The company is called Hopscotch. All right. So it's hopscotchlabs.co, not .com, .co. You can also go to the App Store. It's on iOS. You can search for Bebot for AirPods. And then I am pretty easy to find on the internet too. I'm on Threads and kind of still doing the Twitter thing. So I'm just at Dens.
And are you hiring?
Selectively. We have room to hire. I got to find a designer. I got to find someone that can help with growth. If we met a really amazing AI engineer, right? Some engineering background, but really into massaging prompts and organizing data based off of that, we would probably opportunistically hire that person. The answer is yes. Okay. The answer was no, but now that I'm talking about it, the answer is yes.
So if you're a world-class designer, AI engineer, show your work, show your portfolio, Dennis can take a look.
And if you like working on weird stuff, right? Weird stuff that maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. No one else is doing this stuff. Maybe there's a reason nobody else is doing it, but we think that's the fun thing. Can I add one last thing? Just because I had my wife bring this from the other room. You were asking about burnout. I felt the moment of, should I be working on another thing in this space before? Again, I've done this. Am I doing the same thing? And blah, blah, blah. And I just really hit this point where I was like, I just don't know if I can do it again. And I was on the High Line in New York and I walked by this guy that was selling postcards. And I found this one. And I looked at it and I was like, okay, that's it. That's the answer.
If you get tired, learn to rest, not to quit.
It spoke to me. And I bought it and I hang it in my room now. And that's kind of like the mantra where it's don't quit because you're burned out. Just take a break, fuel yourself up again, get back to work, go back to the thing that you're good at, go back to the thing you're passionate at. And that's kind of been my North Star for a bit. And I figured that was just worth sharing right at the end of this thing.
Awesome. I'm glad you got your rest. Look forward to you lighting it up again. Dennis,
awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me on. This is super fun. Appreciate it.
That was fun. I look forward to the next decade of New York tech. If you know an entrepreneur, especially in New York City, share this episode with them. Dennis has some great insights and inspiration and motivation. And if you enjoyed it, then go ahead and give us a positive review on your favorite platform. And if you'd like to chat, reach out to me directly. You can find me at kc.coach or send me a note on LinkedIn. Until next time, enjoy the ride.